Good evening, Ghana, and you're welcome to World View. This past week has been quite eventful, with an issue that has been so ferociously debated as to whether Ghana has sold out its sovereignty or what we've done in terms of pursuing a robust foreign policy decision is only going to consolidate the bilateral ties between us and the United States of America. Helping me tonight and do a good analysis of the situation is to my immediate left, Professor Bafo Agyemang-Duah, former UN Special Advisor on Governance. Prof, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have next to him my lost but found friend, Mr. Emmanuel Kotin, Executive Director of Africa Center for Security and Counterterrorism. Sir,
thank you.
You're welcome. And then we have Dr. David Percy, a political activist. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I'll start with you, Doc. So many people have said for people like you, who maybe were around when Ghana got independence in 1957.
No,
okay.
Couldn't have been.
Okay.
Oh, I was. I was, yes. I was a kid.
How did the clearance that was given by Parliament, albeit by only one side of the House, that the United States can have a carte blanche, and all the times, some of those quite ridiculous to the ears of Ghanaians, unfettered and unbridled access to our sensitive installations. How did the news come to you, and do you think such a deal is Pan-Africanist enough?
I don't know about the Pan-Africanist bit. I certainly did not think that I would live to see such a day of infamy. That is all I'll say in relation to the question. I didn't think that the Ghanaian government, elected by the Ghanaian people, to serve first and foremost the interests of Ghanaians, would go to the extent that our government and our president have gone. Frankly, I didn't think it would happen. But on the other hand, being a student of history, perhaps it marks a consummation of a process that was started by the same political tradition with the overthrow of Nkrumah. In a certain sense, they are merely completing the work. What it then calls for is a second struggle for independence.
So do you see this as a backdoor that is being used by a very strong world superpower like the United States to recolonize Ghana and by extension?
Backdoor, this is front door. Okay? I mean, the parallel in our history is the bond of 1844. Okay?
Yeah.
Where by that time the British had become the dominant power in the Gold Coast, in control of practically all the forts and castles, trading posts, and were developing alliances with various coastal states. Okay? The slave trade had been abolished because it no longer made economic sense. The British required, as a result of the development of industrial capitalism, a shift in our economy from the production of slaves to the production of raw materials for industry. Okay? So they had abolished the slave trade. The Fanti states, coastal states, that had, I mean, being the principal exit for slaves. Okay, you had the contention with Asante power. Asante had grown rich and powerful following the defeat of Dintra through the control of the slave trade to become very rich. I was looking to take possession, control of the coastal settlements, apart from those that it did not have. So you had the Fanti states threatened by Asante. The British, okay, we had become the dominant power on the coast as a result of developments in technology of warfare, okay, could impose their will in the previous days when they could not. So you had the pretext for the bond was a protection of those states from the incursions of Asante. Okay. In the case of this instance, the pretext is our protection against terrorism. In fact, since the demise of the Soviet Union, the principal banner under which global imperialism has functioned is the war against terrorism. It's an unending war. It's an unending war. It's a permanent war. Through that, there's intervention, there's control, and there are profits. It is basically business.
Okay. And thank you so much. That's quite a profound preamble, especially drawing parallels between the current agreement and what happened in 1844. I'll come back to you, Doc. Ima, you belong to a much, much younger generation. You are tech savvy, and you are able to see things beyond what is written on the parchments of history. And we live in a globalized world where all countries are dependent on each other or one another. Do you see this as a return to enslavement, just as some elderly folks see this?
Well, to view it as a return to enslavement would be a very hard word.
Okay.
I think that, to be very mild, it is we giving away certain rights of our citizens, our sovereignty. You see, if you look at the advent of globalization, it advocates multilateralism and partnership and cooperations on equal basis and respect for sovereignty. And I think that if you look at this agreement, it doesn't inure to the benefit of Ghanaians, not even in the short and medium terms. In the longer term, we even seem to suffer, we will even suffer more. I'm foreseeing that, look, if nothing is done to reverse the current trend on African countries giving their sovereignties because of political nuances, a time will come we will lose our sovereignty in its entirety. Don't get me wrong. Americans are not bad people. We have always cooperated with the Americans. The Akusombo Dam, Baku were built by the Americans. There's nothing wrong with government entering into any form of cooperation with the Americans if it will inure to our mutual benefit. And if such agreements are anchored on equal partnership in the spirit of globalization. But if you look at this current agreement, I'm young and I'm looking at my future. I'm looking at the future of my children. And I am so against this bill because of the nature it was crafted and government haste to get it rectified by Parliament. So to that extent, I'm kind of appalled by the attitude of this current government, given where they came from, reference the two Get-Mo detainees. You remember a year and a half ago, this country was spellbound because of the two Get-Mo detainees present in this country. And insinuations were made that we're inviting terrorists to this country. And you remember the hard time we had defending some of these things. And civil society organizations, Peace Council, religious bodies were all over. But this very agreement, I'm so appalled that these institutions of conscience are silent. I've not heard from the Peace Council. I've not heard from any religious body. And you remember the Catholic Bishop Conference, the strong word they released, the Christian Council, headed by then Professor Mante. Where are they now? Is there anything different from this current arrangement than the two get more detainees? And the sad truth is that our leaders are not leaving positive legacies for we, the youth, to emulate. That is why I have come out as a private citizen, and I am challenging other youth of this country to stand up and fight for their future. Because if you look at this agreement in its entirety, it might not affect the generations of our political elites, because their children are not even with us here. They are abroad enjoying largesse, and they don't care about the ordinary Ghanaian.
Ima, hold on a sec. In one breath, you are saying the Americans are nice people.
Yes.
And when somebody is nice, then the person can be a neighbor to you. You can actually go to bed with your door ajar. But when you say the future of children and grandchildren has been mortgaged, is it that even having 50,000 American soldiers here would mean directly harming posterity? Or how do you view this?
I'm happy you asked this very question. Look, in realism, you don't assume that you know the intentions of another nation. They can be good, but you see, Americans have a preamble for their foreign policy. They always have permanent interests, but no permanent friends. And I have a good example to give. You remember when John Mahama brought the two Get More detainees? The Americans were on the side of NDC trying to defend their presence here. And MPP at the time said when they come to power, they were going to return these detainees. When Nana Akufo-Addo won power, who was the first person to go to his house and congratulate him? Was it not the American ambassador? Just some few months ago, he was eulogizing the president, preparing the way for this sort of agreement. So my advice to MPP is that Americans could do the same thing they've done to the SY government. And this issue is not about NDC, neither is it about MPP. That was why I was saddened when NDC held a press conference on the matter. I told a friend that once NDC have held a press conference on this matter, MPP was going to call their bluff and have their way. And indeed, they did. I remember some few hours to the ratification of this deal, I was on Ghana Connect, on Joy FM, to say that it is a litmus test for our parliament to see if they are a house of conscience or a house of political rubber stamping. And indeed, they proved to me they are a house of what? Political rubber stamping, because cabinet has approved it and they have the majority in parliament. They'll follow suit. Okay. Despite Ghanaians' overwhelming outcry over the agreement.
Okay. Ima, thank you so much. And Doc, you've heard Ima and Doc, Mr. Cotin and Doc, and they seem to be pessimistic about this deal. You served as special advisor to the UN on governance, so I suspect you are a career diplomat. In the international scene, don't monkeys play by sizes? If a first world country like the US, upon which third world countries like ours depend so heavily, would want you as a kid brother to just put something in a little corner for them, would you have the bully pulpit to reject such a proposition?
Well, thank you. In the first place, David made a very interesting remarks. Now, I don't see, it's not clear to me the connection between the bond of 1844 and the Ashantis being invading and being infant is being protected. I don't see that connection at all, but that's his view.
No, he was trying to
no, I know
raise concerns.
No.
He was drawing parallels that a pretext could be given.
I understand. And then if the argument is that by this act, you've gone back to slavery, that's also very interesting, because then I will say in the Fourth Republic, the first time we went to slavery was 1998, when under President Rawlins, he signed the first agreement that seems to contain most of the elements that are present in the current agreement. And then that enslavement was reinforced in 2015, when President John Mahama, through his foreign minister, also signed a second agreement with most of the current elements reflected in that. So we were enslaved long ago in that respect. But I think the whole issue, first of all, I'm very, very happy the way Ghanaians have reacted. It shows a certain level of growth in our awareness as people. Because unfortunately, in the two earlier incidents, they were not made public for people to react. So we don't know whether at that time people who have had that level of awareness to have perhaps protested. But it's good because it shows that the nation is growing democratically in terms of citizens' activism. I think these are very great developments. And you know, because this is not a new agreement, it's not something that we have never experienced before, one will have to, by necessity, draw on the previous ones to make sense out of the present. If there was no previous such agreements, it would have been much simpler. So if you draw on the previous agreements and you see what is happening today, perhaps it makes a little bit a better sense for you. I do agree that some elements perhaps shouldn't be there. And I think a lot of people have expressed themselves on those elements that seem to, quote unquote, sell our sovereignty to the Americans for a pittance. Here is 20 million. I don't know if that is the case. I mean, those elements are certainly not sitting in so many ways. But if you consider, coming to some part of your question, if you consider modern international relations, now I do understand, we can go back to the 18th, 19th, 20th century, and if in the Cold War period, when the world was by and large bipolar, dominated by Western imperialism, headed by the Americans. All those things have come and gone. But of course, when I say they are gone, it doesn't mean they are completely out of the picture. Every powerful country seeks to enhance its power by aggregating it through partnerships. And unfortunately, if you are a small, weaker country, and you are not careful, you are taken advantage of by the powerful country. So it seems to be in that context that we're finding ourselves. Does that really sell our sovereignty? That's a very interesting question. It can also be tricky. First of all, you see, democracy is a very interesting system. And at times you follow the Americans, not that they have the best democratic model. They have something advanced than us, but it's not the best. Because democracy will always remain a work in progress. So if, at times if you follow how they debate such critical issues in their Congress, with the Democrats and the Republicans, just like we saw in our own case, and I was watching very keenly, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the opposition, the NDC. Now, of course, I enjoy the NPP trying to take their stand. But once they go and they shout and fight and da-da-da, then it comes time where they have to vote. Once they vote and the decision is made, you don't hear noises. Because those people who voted represent the voice of the larger population. Unfortunately, that's how democracy is. So my hope is that with everybody having the opportunity to express themselves and our representatives having decided on the issue in terms of governance, the matter is almost closed. Now, I also know that even at that point, people still have a right, if there are legal avenues, to challenge decisions made. There's no question at all about that. So whoever decides to challenge the decision has the right to do so. But I think in so many ways, I think that looking at the issues, I think there have been so many exaggerations, something bordering on fear-mongering, as if what has happened is spelling Armageddon for Ghana tomorrow. My very good friend here said his children will come and they'll tweet a mortgage. My goodness, if you go around the world and see how many agreements, such bilateral agreements have been signed with all kinds of countries, I don't think those kind of fears are present.
Doc, it looks like when you put two and two together, you aren't completely repudiating the deal. But could Ghana have struck a better deal?
Certainly. In fact, that's another dimension. Because one of the serious issues, and maybe to cite an example that I'm very familiar with, when I was a UN senior advisor in Tanzania, UNDP decided to introduce a program to support African governments to strengthen their negotiation abilities. So over there, there was a group of international lawyers in New York who volunteered their services to countries that wanted them. And I was in Tanzania when they came. And I tell you, what I experienced was mind-boggling. One example, you know, Tanzania under Nyerere did not open up their minds, because for him, and rightly so, I believe, until the local people develop their own capacities, they will not allow any foreigners to come and dig their gold or their silver or anything. But of course, after his death, the subsequent government decided to open up. So when I went to the country, they had opened up just about 8 years earlier. Okay? What was happening was that these mining companies would go and dig the gold, and with the alibi that there was no processing plant, they would carry the whole dust to England, where they will be sifted through. And then they will report to the government how much gold they found. And besides that, the government was being given just about 2.5% royalty. So it was such a devastating experience, okay? So, and that is why I think the UNDP at the time wanted to do that program. Unfortunately, the program did not last for all kinds of reasons from headquarters. That is just to say that it is true that smaller nations like ours, we have not developed our negotiation skills enough to be able to strike deals that are favorable to us. So certainly this could be one of them. Despite what I hear that it went to a committee and all that, okay. I think that we're shortchanging many.
Okay, thank you.
If you allow me, I just wanted to make a little contribution to, I would say my father, because, Prof, in fact, Prof made a very interesting analysis about previous agreements that were signed from 1988.
98.
98, yes. It's true. Such agreements existed.
Yes, sir.
But see, I don't believe in politics of equalization.
I did not.
You see, if those agreements were not good, if those agreements were not good,
this one is
20 years ago, why should we repeat same mistakes? Are we growing as a country? And another interesting point is that the government hands were tied, so they couldn't have signed this agreement without Parliament rectifying it. Reference the two get more detainees. You know, 2 private citizens went to the Supreme Court for interpretation of certain provisions in our Constitution. Yes. And the Apex Court gave a clear directive that such international agreements could never be signed by the executive without Parliament rectifying it. So to some extent, it will be a gross dishonesty on the part of the government to say that previous government didn't bring such agreements to the people of Ghana, and they have done it. You understand? So that's why in life, when you are in opposition, more or less, You are careful certain things you do and you don't do. Because if you live in a glass house, you don't throw stone. And this is precisely what is staring at the current government. And I am even quite surprised by the position of the president, because if you look at his background, he has always stood for every form of injustice in this country, even at the peril of his life. So to get power and this thing happening under his watch, I don't think it's motivating enough for we the youth who see him as our idol and trying to emulate him.
Mr. Coaten, thank you for that intervention. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to come back to you. Dr. Percy, there seems not to be consensus around this table. Ghana, you are a small country. You can't refine your oil. You can't make any good product out of your cocoa. You depend upon Western countries. Why should you be sat with and negotiated as an equal partner and not play second fiddle to a first world country like the United States?
First of all, there was no negotiation. This is an American imposition. I feel insulted for anyone to talk about an agreement. And you had a fraudulent process that has given the impression that our parliament has somehow been involved in a negotiation of an agreement, which is also totally false. This fraud has been passed through our parliament. It could only have been obtained through either blackmail or bribery or both. And our president and the MPP in parliament have nearly joined a long list of stooges going back over 500 years.
These are very strong sentiments, Doc.
Precisely. They have nearly joined a long list of stooges going back over 500 years who have betrayed our collective interest at every significant point. But you know, the real problem is that these crimes continue because the people have not punished them. Prof expresses the hope that somehow this closes the door. Unfortunately, it does not.
I said no. Still, there's room for people.
No. Even that avenue you talk about the law. Sorry. This would be in a public court, on the streets, whatever it takes legitimately to stop and reverse this crime against the people of Ghana. It will happen. And you just have to go back to our history. When the British, after the bond, started expanding their authority, imposed a poll tax with the connivance of the chiefs. It was resisted. It was stopped. Of course, they had to go around it.
Maybe the dynamics are different today,
Sorry.
Doc.
Sorry.
Maybe the dynamics are different.
Sorry.
Today.
Time does not change these matters. What we're talking about, in so many words, is sovereignty. The bond of 1844 was only one sheet of paper. This latest bond is several paragraphs and several pages long. It doesn't change the essence. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know where this comes from. Why people feel that we have to express our friendliness to some other people. Like God said, we elect our president to what? Address our interests.
And what is so bad about having Americans in Ghana? And they say this is not a military
There's nothing, this is not an issue about having Americans in Ghana or not. It's about the interests of Ghana.
What is your interest in this? And what is your bargaining chip? Some people have argued, well, Ghana should as well be able to open a post in Washington, D.C. Number one, we don't have the interest and we don't have the capabilities to do that.
Well, I think
That's
that's
about the principle of reciprocity.
I find it difficult to follow your line of reasoning. I don't know what kind of mentality can pose the issues the way you're posing them. As a Ghanaian, our duty, the duty of our president, okay, is to serve our interests, period. This is a crime against the Ghanaian people's interests. That's what it is. And I said that it could only have been procured through bribery or blackmail or both. Now, what has happened really is this. The NPP, through its internal processes, has created a fetish in a president. I don't have many friends in the NPP, but those who do tell me that there are many people in the NPP who are worried and troubled by this.
That the forces around the president can't pinch him or prick him and say, Your Excellency, you are wrong on this one.
They've created a fetish out of him. No one can speak to him or challenge him or caution him. And like lemmings, they all want to follow him. Well, they are welcome to do so. But I can tell them that it will come at a cost to their party.
Wow, Doctor, these are very, very good. Strong sentiments.
Yes.
Very, very
because,
strong
you know,
sentiments.
everybody knows that this is a smelly deal. I mean, figuratively, it's like going out to bring in feces into your living room.
But
now, it will bring stench, it will bring flies, it will bring disease. But this is being done with eyes open. And people are saying that, oh, this is nothing. Sorry. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
It is everything.
Look, but just to add quickly to what my brother said, before you ask me whatever. If you are a landlord and a tenant comes to rent your place, are you the person who prepares the tenancy agreement for the tenant, or the tenant prepares his own tenancy arrangement for you? And sadly, the defense minister said it on the floor of Parliament, that it is a standard agreement US has always had with every country. So does it mean we should have the same thing? Do we have same conditions like other countries? No.
And going back to the analogy you have made, and I'm sure if you're living in your house today, some 10 years ago you were renting in Accra.
Yes.
There are times a tenant would have a bigger say than the landlord.
No.
For example, if you're ready to give 5 times what the ordinary
you mentioned
tenant
here
can give.
that monkeys play by sizes. And when this issue happened, I read your press release and your stand on the matter. You support the deal. And you even made statement to the effect that we are in a unipolar world. When American sneezes, the rest of us catches the cold. And I want to respectfully disagree with you. We are no longer in the Cold War. We are in the 21st century, and globalization has become the order of the day. So even if you are an island, so far as you are a sovereign state, you can negotiate with the first state like the US on equal terms, because you are all sovereign countries governed by your own constitutions and laws.
Isn't that difficult, realistically speaking? Ima, and I want us to approach this quite dispassionately.
Yes.
You remember the EPA agreement, the Economic Partnership Agreement between ECOWAS and the EU?
Yes.
Certainly so many people who are Pan-African in their outlook kicked against it.
But what is the status of that agreement today? Are those fears not with us today? So that is exactly what we are talking about. And I can understand what was government motivation to rush the bill. I would have thought, given the public outcry, they would have at least withdrawn this bill at its current state, do broader consultation, take this window of opportunity since Parliament is on recess to educate the Ghanaian people. That is the beauty of democracy. The Freedom of Information Bill or law, is it not before Parliament? Why didn't they use the same agency to pass it? They were raising legalities. So this is the problem. You know, I have served notice that I will go to court for the Supreme Court to give some interpretation of certain provisions in our Constitution. And if you look at the directive they gave, as far as the to get more detainees, it was very clear that such international agreements should be signed by the president.
The executive.
It says the president.
You mentioned the president.
Yes. It says the president, because in John Mahama's case, the agreement was signed by the president. And that was the basis the two individuals went to court. The document that was before Parliament was not signed by the president. So to some extent, Parliament had nothing to rectify. And that was the basis. The minority walked out. And you can say that in the spirit of democracy, when you have the majority having their way, it means that such a bill is binding on the rest of us. Okay. So it is the Supreme Court that will give certain interpretation regarding the ranging powers of these bodies.
Okay, Mr. Cotton, it will be refreshing to see you seek a better better clarification of such a decision at the Supreme Court, so that people will understand what really went to because just as Prof has indicated, maybe we've crossed the Rubicon. But if there is opportunity for civil protest and legal contestation,
I can say that we have not.
We can roll back this deal.
We have not.
Okay, sir.
Okay? Our whole history says that we have not. But actually, Ghanaians are not unique in that respect. Any people will receive enslavement. It does not matter how long. It does not matter what justifications or sophistry is brought to dress it up. Okay? Now, he's spoken about and I referred to it earlier, because that is a fraudulent process intended to give the impression that the Ghanaian parliament was somehow involved in a negotiation of an agreement, which is in fact an imposition that our president has accepted in a treasonous betrayal of our collective interests. But this is treason.
Okay.
No, this is treason.
Prof, very, very strong words.
Yes, it is treason.
You know what? If it's treason, Rawlings will be tried, Mahama will be tried.
No problem. You see, I made a point. I made a point about a long line of stooges that have betrayed our interests.
If it's treason,
going back to 500 years.
Should be tried.
So I'm not about to get involved into this equalization bit.
It's not equalization.
Sorry, I'm saying that there'll be a long line of people who have been treacherous to our collective interest, going back over 500 years.
Great. Let's line all of them up.
Okay?
Many of them are dead.
No problem. The point is to recognize the nature of the crime. And if those criminals are alive, we can go for them.
Yeah, we go to exhume their bodies.
But it's a crime. Okay? So, I mean, we must be clear about this. And we must, listen, it's an important point. I just discovered that 1998 agreement was signed on the 24th of February, 1998. A very interesting coincidence. You understand? It says a lot about the persons who are at the center of that. But you know what? I'm not interested in the individuals who are involved in this matter. All I'm saying is that the key issue is the collective interest of the Ghanaian working people. And those people who betray those interests are committing treason.
Yesterday, and you know, it coincided this 20 years of the attack of American installation in Tanzania and Kenya,
and
Nairobi. You know the casualties.
They were bombed, their embassies were
Bombed, yeah.
Just to correct.
And Prof, you seem to be alone now on this panel.
Oh, no, I don't know. We have different ideas, different views, and that's the beauty of democracy. Those who are opposed to it, they have every right to do so. And I believe, as he rightly said, legitimate means are there. They can explore those means. And that's what this business is all about. Then another thing that at times frightens me, you see, all of us become ideologues in a way. When we believe strongly that because my point of view has been downed, therefore I'll have to take up arms. I'm not speaking literally, I'm just yeah. Because look, if you accept the system we have created for ourselves, for all its weaknesses and all its beauty, how we make national decisions, then we have to be careful when the nation embarks on something. We have every right to criticize anything the president does. But for anyone to extend arguments, to accuse people of treason, I think that is serious.
Serious, yeah.
Very serious.
I agree with you on that.
And I think we shouldn't be using words so loosely in this kind of conversation.
So what is it that the president and the parliament have done?
What have they done that deserve
They've
treason?
handed over sovereignty.
What is the sovereignty? Define sovereignty for me. Let's engage on that.
Control over our policy.
Since when? Since when?
Control over our policy.
Since when?
You
Since
could say,
independence
Prof,
since when?
sorry, you could say that in many important areas, there has been a derogation from that. Many important respects, okay? You speak about the fact that in some cases we are not able to fund our budgets, etc. Okay? But in fact, a very rich people. Our wealth is simply stolen from us. We are not poor. We are very rich people. And that's why all those flies are around here. It's our wealth that is systematically stolen from us with the participation and cooperation of persons who look Ghanaian but are not working for the interests of Ghana.
Listen, look,
So,
let me come
so
in.
I'm saying,
David, let me come in.
yes,
Let me come in here.
yes.
Those who are elected to represent you, let's come back to Gitmo.
I saying they cannot commit treason.
Just a minute, just a minute. When Gitmo came on, some people didn't like it.
Yes.
Those in government liked it.
Yeah.
Maybe that government was kicked out.
Yeah. Because
Partly due to
the two
that.
Gitmo.
Exactly. If that assumption is correct, then let's assume that
this government
those who do not like this agreement have every right in 2020 to vote this government out. That should be the thrust of our discussion as Democrats. You see, that's what I'm saying. Don't veer into these kinds of
I make no apologies for calling this treason.
And see,
because that is what has happened.
I cannot sit on a panel.
The deliberate betrayal of the collective interest of Ghana by a group or a section or any one leader constitutes treason.
No, man, come on.
You see, I think in democracy,
I'm a Democrat, and we have to talk as Democrats. Unless you want to subscribe to the system that
gentlemen,
I think treason is a hard word.
Well, you may be uncomfortable with it, but that is what has happened.
It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened.
It's in your mind.
It's still the process.
Alone is that the mind of Ghana?
Hello, gentlemen. Let's listen to the views.
Your mind is not that of Ghana.
Let's listen to the views of the important
I've never been this on the panel. I'm sorry.
Let's listen to the views of the important people that are watching us from their homes. And someone says, I enjoyed today's discussion, but in my view, these issues should be addressed and political debates should not compromise that. But I support Prof's views after all he said about democracy. Someone says, my name is Corton. I fully support all views on the program. Political debate will not put enough solutions to either agree with the United States. Yemen should be a school of thought. He says Yemen should be a case study for us. Would want to ask, what kind of activity of the U.S. military involved in that creates awareness for terrorism in Ghana and not by our own deeds? Rashid, your message is not too clear. I'm seriously and sincerely disappointed at the decision of the ruling MPP. Americans will never enter into an agreement without having an interest to achieve. And someone says, this is a good discussion. You people are doing well for Mother Ghana. I appreciate the fact that elderly statesmen seem to be at variance on this issue.
I'm learning from them.
Yeah, exactly.
In the middle.
Maybe we are viewing things from different crystal balls.
Yeah.
And Doug seems to see this as a crime against humanity. A
No,
crime against
I said
our
a crime
sovereignty.
against the interests of Ghanaian people.
So the magnitude of this sellout,
Yeah.
in Doug's understanding, is tantamount to treason.
In fact, I think Doc's word is a bit harsh.
Well, you can check the meaning of treason, the literal meaning of treason.
In the current dispensation we are,
you'll come to the same
I
conclusion.
think that
Certainly, anything that undermines the nationhood or statehood or sovereignty of a country can be classified
as treason, yes. But you see, this agreement, if there was no any window of opportunity to seek redress and the case was closed, that is when I would have supported Doug assertion that, look,
It's treasonable.
it's treasonable.
what are the remedies available to
Look,
the Ghanaians who don't agree with this
look,
decision?
the apex court of this land.
After the interpretation, what happens?
Look, what they can give certain directives.
They will interpret
That-
your point. Yeah, what are
After the interpretation, what happens?
After the
because Gitmo 2,
look.
on the issue of Gitmo 2, the Supreme Court did not see eye to eye with the policymakers at that time
Yes.
because there was no transparency.
Yes.
But in this case, due process.
No,
has
no,
been-
When you say due process, look, I don't want to agree with that. Look, this bill was laid before Parliament. Within that very minute, it was rectified. There was no opportunity for the people's representatives to debate it. So you can't say all the avenues were exhausted. No. So look, among some of the relief, Prof, we are seeking is to injunct the agreement until the Supreme Court gives proper interpretation of it.
To
And
be great.
and
That happens.
And you know, as a private citizen, a proud one for that matter, the law allows me. But you see, what is it that the Americans are looking for in Ghana? My brother, to give unfettered access to facilities at our airports and naval base.
My brother,
Any country world is source. Those are very critical security installation you should not joke
You know
with.
what? On this show,
Yeah.
hold on a sec. I'm sitting on the fence and I'm taking various views.
Yes.
But for God's sake, Ima, what do you have to hide from people who have sold out the warships you own, who have sold to you the AK-47 rifles you own, who have sold all the things you think you should have privacy over? What is that? You are an open book,
Oh, yes.
so to speak.
So do they give them to you for free?
Yeah, but
They don't give them to you
this-
for free.
this
But for
brothers-
Christ's sake, you see, if you want to build our nation by the premise you've just brought, it means that we don't have a country.
no, they would. This
It
could,
means that we don't have a country.
look, our military capabilities could have been shrouded in secrecy if we were
look,
Iran
Ibad,
or Turkey
Ibad,
producing our own weapons.
Ibad.
But you buy all of these from the
Ibad,
whites.
is it only the Americans who produce weapons? Is
We
it
have-
only
we
the
have-
Americans?
we have Eastern
Look at
European
Ghana's foreign policy. We have always been an alliance. We either belong to the West or the East.
since when?
Since independence.
Till when?
Well, it's
Till
just
when?
until
I hear this
the
and
diplomatic until
Please.
we got diplomacy,
You know the last time
democracy.
the no-aligned movement met, and who was there?
Look,
You see,
Prof, let us not discount this school of thought. Listen,
Ima,
look,
don't be emotional about
I'm not
this.
emotional. I'm just stating my facts
Let's
and
consider the
respectfully
realities on the ground.
Can I make a this thing? You know,
And I've just been signaled
You see,
we should
I've
be
not.
wrapping up.
You know, I've not landed. You see, there is a school of thought. We can't discount them. This school of thought is of the view that anywhere we have American troops, it invites anti-American sentiments.
Correct.
Look at Burkina Faso. Look at Cote d'Ivoire.
So
Look at Kenya. You understand?
Basically French.
And we even lost one of our illustrious sons, Professor Ono. May his soul rest in peace. And we are saying that, and look at Ghana surrounded by this country. We've not had any attack. And that we have feared that if we don't bring Americans, we can't be protected. Look at Rwanda, that we are using as a model to defend this. Is Rwanda a democracy? Paul Kagame changed the constitution to extend his stay in government, but the Americans never spoke.
Sorry,
is it not the same thing Joseph Kabila is trying to do in Congo, and the whole world is against him?
Gentlemen, it's been quite an exhilarating discussion, and I'm sure the debate is going to continue. I've been in the studios with, to my immediate left has been Professor Bafo Adjumani-Dua, former UN Special Advisor on governance. Prof, thanks for making time.
It's a pleasure.
And my good brother, Mr. Emmanuel Cotton.
Thanks. It's
So
nice to
patriotic.
reconnect, yes.
Executive Director, Africa Center for Security and Counterterrorism, and Dr. David Percy, a political analyst.
No?
Activist.
Activist.
Activist. Well, viewers, thanks for making time with us. So we come your way next week with another edition of Worldview. This show has been ably produced by Celestine Avi. My name is Irbad Ibrahim. Have a good night.